Welcome to the first video on this channel. This is Billionaire Biographies, and today we have somebody who used to be one of the world's wealthiest individuals. He had over $34 billion in his net worth. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, it crashed and he went $1 billion into debt. I thought his story was absolutely fascinating. There are so many lessons to be learned. I felt horrible losing $100,000, but thanks to that, I became a well-rounded individual. Now, I can't imagine myself in a position of losing millions of dollars or how to handle a situation like Eike Batista, but thanks to history, we're able to progress and evolve. This channel is for your education and a little bit of entertainment. Every single one of these individuals has crazy stories. There's a lot of information about most of them out there, but no one's really talking about them. And if they are, it's in a negative light. Every single one of these individuals became an expert in their field. There's no way you can become a billionaire by yourself. You need other people, and you need to be really good at convincing them that you are the best. So without further ado, this is your brain on billionaires. Eike Batista had one of the wildest stories you can imagine. He was so close to being the world's wealthiest individual, and that position constantly fluctuates. When I was a kid, I remember Bill Gates was the wealthiest individual. Warren Buffett was up there for quite a bit. Jeff Bezos became the wealthiest individual. Eike Batista, though, at the time of his claim, Carlos Slim was the world's wealthiest man. He seemed to be on top of the world, and unfortunately, his entire world and the Brazilian economy collapsed at the same time. As earlier mentioned, Eike Batista fell into $1 billion of debt. It didn't stop there though, because he eventually landed in prison. I can't imagine what he must have felt when his Lamborghinis, his yachts, his mansions, everything, his entire company, it was all taken away from him. His life that he spent decades building on, the empire crumbled. Any other person would give up at that point, but not Eike Batista. The video's release has been delayed a little bit. I broke my pinky toe. Eike Batista is currently 62 years old. He was born on November 3rd, 1956. So he celebrated his birthday last month, probably in not such an extravagant manner as he did in his previous years. But as with every choice we make, there are long-term consequences with that. And he most certainly learned from his mistakes. This video is for you guys to learn from his mistakes so you don't ever have to get into that position. Some people on the internet claim, in a very short summary, he got into this fix because he pumped his companies, he overhyped the markets. It's similar to the recent Thanos scandal in Silicon Valley. We also saw a huge influx of wealth due to the stock portfolio of a CEO. She was super young. She seemingly gained $9 billion out of thin air and then lost it all. That's going to be a topic for another video. Mr. Batista made his fortune in natural resources, specifically mining, gas, and oil. As with the large majority of the billionaires mentioned on this channel, most of them are diversifying their revenue sources. There's a comment saying with the average millionaire having 7 streams of income. When you reach billionaire status, you can have hundreds or even thousands of random little income streams. Whether it's real estate, stock, dividends, cryptocurrencies, someone's passionate about their art. Once you have the capital, you're able to multiply it many times fold. Now, what landed Mr. Batista in jail was what happened after he got into debt. And from my suspicions, you're not going to find this in any article. This is just my opinion. I could be wrong, but it seems from my research that after he went into debt, he still had some business dealings from his old companies. Since he pumped up his companies, it was a little sketchy. There was corruption and bribery happening before. That probably continued after he went into debt. Once he was in a desperate position where he wasn't able to get loans anymore, it was much easier for him to get into trouble. He had a lot of enemies, and he wasn't the only one to fall down at the same time. In March 2014, Operation Car Wash, nicknamed Lava Jato, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, it was the biggest corruption scandal in the history of Brazil. It involved getting the ex-president into a courtroom, over $5 billion paid out in briberies and random fees, billionaires getting arrested, some getting life sentences, company executives being removed, and the Brazilian economy crashing, affecting other countries in the region. The damage could be stated above $10 billion. Companies' reputations were tarnished. In the early days of the operation, law enforcement officers were focused focusing on money laundering agents. These were called dolieros. Now, what they discovered is that some of these dolieros were working for an executive for a company named Petrobras. Petrobras wasn't Eike Batista's company. He was chairman of the Brazilian conglomerate EBX Group. So the main company in that was OGX, focused on the oil and gas industries. Also MPX, which was for energy, LLX, which was for logistics, MMX for mining, and OSX for offshore services and equipment. Nowadays, EBX is advising new startup companies trying to rebrand themselves and rebuild their company. But a few years back, EBX Group, along with Petrobras and a few of these other large companies in the segment, they were all caught up in Operation Car Wash, and it was started from a few money laundering agents, and then it went all the way up to the executives and the chairmen of these companies. Now, Eike Batista, what was he sentenced for? He was fined 53 million reais, which at the time was worth over $13.6 million. He was found guilty of bribing a Rio de Janeiro governor. This was in the past a $16.5 million bribe. It was in relation to a fictitious gold mine, so obviously profit for EBX Group. This was in relation to the pumping of its stock, trying to bring up confidence in other investors into the company. The whole scandal was really dependent upon the company saying they had much more resources than they had at their disposal. Now, when it came time to prove that, things got a little hazy. The ex-governor of Rio, Sergio Cabral, he is now serving a 100-year prison sentence. He's in the Bangu jail, which also Eike Batista attended. In the first 2 weeks of this year, 142 inmates died in Bangu jail. It's one of the worst prisons in the entire world. You have multiple people crammed into a jail cell. There were riots. There was a lot of very grim activities going on behind those bars. Now, under Brazilian law, anybody with a university degree that's completed, they're usually detained away from other inmates during trial. The problem is Eike Batista didn't finish his university in Brazil. He actually dropped out, and since he is also a German citizen, he finished it in Europe, which that doesn't count. So Eike Batista was forced to share his cell with other individuals who weren't associated with the corruption scandals, as in some of the most hardened criminals in the world. That's got to be a really scary position to be in, no matter who you are. This man built super ports. He helped fund Brazil's $50 billion airport, their 2016 Olympics. He brought in more than $300 billion worth of coal from Colombia. At one point in time, EBX Group was worth over 1.5 trillion, or so he claimed. He worked with entertainment, and now it seems that's all over. But the story doesn't end here. One of the sources of my information was actually an interview done by a small YouTube channel. Now, this was after he lost his money, and he was still in a very, very enlightened state. A lot of people will look at his failure and discount him, forgetting that he achieved more than thousands of people combined. This man has decades of experience in doing some of the craziest things in his country. So let's not entirely focus on the negatives, but let's also learn from his past and what he did to succeed, regardless of how much money he lost, which Bloomberg put out a quote that was similar to, he was a man who had the fastest burn rate of capital in the world. He still made enough money to buy over 175,000 Lamborghinis. Now, this has had his net worth, so his companies were bringing in even more. And that just goes to show you 175,000. These are numbers that even that is so difficult to imagine. If you're from a large city in America, every single person in that community, even the little kids, they'd be driving Lamborghini Gallardos. And if it's a smaller community, you can ramp that up to the Aventadors or the Reventons. He himself had a Lamborghini Aventador and multiple other cars with which his son actually got into an accident. Wait till the end of the video to find more information about that. So let's begin. When he was 12 years old, Eike Batista moved with his father to Germany. His Mutter Jutta Fürnken. She was originally born from Germany, and Eike says that he learned self-esteem and discipline from his mutti. He says her contribution has made a significant impact in his success. He was a philanthropist, as many billionaires are, whether it's for tax purposes or trying to change his community, where he stated as a German citizen, he felt it was part of his natural upbringing to try and give back to the community, help out those less fortunate. He was investing into the city and the local community, so hopefully everything would be looking much more prosperous in the long term. He donated to a local children's hospital that was focused on heart surgeries, and the children's hospital was renamed to Ute for his mom. He also was a very active individual in sports, and he was racing in offshore power boating, which is a crazy sport. He was a world champion in that. So he spent 11 years in Europe after moving there, and then he returned to Brazil. His parents returned a little bit earlier though, when he was 18 years of age. So he studied in Germany, then moved to Belgium for a little bit, went back to Germany to study in university in Aachen. He had to survive on half of his monthly allowance, so he was a little concerned about that. How do I do this, and how do I maintain a good standard of living? He started selling door-to-door insurance in Aachen. He said it was a wonderful way for his sales skills to go up. It was a beautiful learning experience for business. He gained a lot of motivation for this, and he was determined to gain his independence thanks to his entrepreneurial efforts. So he made a little bit of money. He started investing here and there, and before you know it, he had some pretty good capital to work with. He started trading diamonds. He was also, while in Belgium, helping the Congo colonies with corned beef and other weird products. But it was the diamond trade that actually helped bring in the capital, and it also brought him to one of his loves, which is gold. Speaking of gold, if you're familiar with my cryptocurrency channel, you know I'm a big fan of that. But today is the first day I bought some gold in my life. Now I do have a gold chain and some silver coins, but I actually went out and purchased 5 grams of gold today. Sold a little bit of Bitcoin. I was inspired to start something new. This isn't for investment purposes. It's more for securing my future and feeling a little bit safer. For more than 2 decades in production, he had 8 or 9 gold mines, he said, and also 3 iron ore mines. Since the diamond trade brought him into gold, he started trading heavily with that, and with the proper investments, it brought him into the trading world initially, but then he got stuck in the mining world. He had his eyes open, full of opportunity. He was dealing with $60 million of gold by the age of 23. He was ripe, he was young, he was motivated, and his ego was high because he just profited $6 million, 1/10 of his revenue, but enough to certainly set him on his path to Billionaires Row. So with that $6 million, which goes a whole lot further in Brazil than in America, and this was back in the 80s. So adjusted for inflation, we're talking about 8 figures right here. He used this to start investing into the Amazon jungle. He was extracting alluvial tin. He was certainly not considering the risks involved. He didn't care. He was making millions and millions of dollars, and he was so young while doing it. He thought he was Superman. He could take on the whole world, and he sort of did. He moved from trading into mining operations extremely fast, and he gained success from everything he put his money into. He came from a technical background. He really enjoyed engineering and working with machinery. Eike said you have to really enjoy what you're doing. When asked what kind of motivation he would give to young entrepreneurs, his advice is to have a dream, never bend on that dream. The most important element is to persevere, learn a lot about a specific region, a niche, a genre, an industry, whatever it is that you're super passionate about, but also be holistic. And as long as you're determined, you're working hard, you're hustling for it, there's a pretty good chance you're going to succeed. In 1981, he was invited to exchange his Brazilian assets into a Canadian company. It was TVX Gold. He became the CEO due to having the majority assets in that company. And this trade helped him get exposed to the stock market a little bit. This initiated his role with global capital markets. He had a silver mine in Chile. He moved to Chile for a little bit. He also started up mining operations in Kamchatka, Russia, in Greece, in the Czech Republic. From 1980 to 2000, he was able to create more than $20 $20 billion of value. Between 1991 and 1996, his company tripled in value, and he also married a model, Luma de Oliveira, in 1991. They had a divorce in 2004. He had 3 kids. All 3 of them were sons, heirs to the throne, one of which killed a person. He was very much interested in social media, and his Twitter actually has a massive following, over 1.2 million followers. He also released a book, so he's an author, The Heart of the Matter. He built 5% of Brazil's power generation at one point. He does admit that one of his largest mistakes was failing badly in oil. He underestimated the complexity of producing oil offshore. He tried replicating what Petrobras did. He said the region that he chose was simply just unprofitable. He assumed since he was so successful with other regions, he would be easily able to do this as well. One opinion says, technical risk and product risk got him. Drilling down in the middle of an ocean on an operation backed by debt, which is pre-revenue and totally hyped by stock markets, very questionable indeed. Warren Buffett commented that one of the largest mistakes Eike Batista did was having too many liabilities. He had a lot of debt, just massive amounts, $5 billion worth of debt with his companies while he was at the top, and then when he lost his stock values, well, eventually he admitted he paid back more than $25 billion of debt within 5 years. I'm not sure how much he had remaining. You know, it gets very problematic when you're a billionaire dealing with debt, because the banks can't just be like, They don't know what to do in certain cases, as is with a perfect example of Trump and his 4 bankruptcies. Right before he went to prison, he was very interested in trying to pay back the debtors, trying to get more investors for his future businesses. He was learning a lot about nanotechnology, and he was right about that, where yes, there have been some massive advancements in that field, where a couple of years ago the technology simply was not there. He was majorly convinced that this would change the world. It would be one of those major factors. When he went to prison, he eventually was shifted to house arrest and then back again into prison. This is at that point where one of the pictures was with him at a shaved head. Many business and finance related media such as Forbes magazine, Business Week, and Bloomberg News are still in the process of concluding whether Eike Batista holds the record for having been the fastest destroyer of wealth. Wow. Eike regrets listing his companies in the stock market. Also, another huge mistake of his was claiming that his company could pump 750,000 barrels of oil a day, where in reality it was at 15,000, a huge difference. There was management issues, corruption issues, some economic global downturns, and all of this created the perfect storm for him to just collapse. In total, the registered companies that Eike was attached to, there was over 17 of them. Many were ending with X. The reason he did this, EGX, OBX, MMX, LLX, OSX, REX, was that the X was to signify multiplication of his funds. One interesting note was that when the arrest warrant was out for him and police raided his mansion, he wasn't in the country. He had actually left for New York, and he spent 4 days abroad. He did say that he was going to return in the past. He made good on his promises. He was actually fighting this system. He was trying to prove that he was innocent. He appealed all the courts, and even currently there is a chance that he might be free within a couple of years, but you know, as he's aging and with such heavy media coverage, this may seem a little bit different than the previous times. Now here is where we finally get to the story of crazy facts. He had a $1 million McLaren Mercedes just chilling in his lounge, and this McLaren Mercedes was the one that was involved in a crash. His convicted son was cleared by Brazil's justice. This was back in the early part of 2015. The 24-year-old had been sentenced in June 2013 for a 2012 killing of a cyclist while driving the Mercedes McLaren SLR. They were ordered to pay more than $350,000 in compensation to the victim's family. He never made the payment though, it seems. As part of the sentence, his son Thor He had his driver's license revoked for 2 years. However, he had multiple photographs of him driving other cars during this time period. At the time of this crash, his father was probably not happy because this was during the trial for ongoing charges of insider trading, market manipulation with dumping stocks, and heavy hits to his stock portfolio. A judge ordered more than $1 billion of his assets to be seized. Some of these were mansions, airplanes, a Pershing yacht that was worth $8.5 million. Also, assets from his former wife were taken away, the Playboy model. Now, there are conspiracy theories stating that his family is still rich because there was more than $400 million during this time period that was sent to the Cayman Islands. Maybe that was laundered. Maybe the family is still living in a lavish lifestyle. Now, some of the more interesting details to this story was a Fabergé egg was actually a fake, and he told the police that it was worth $20 million. That was probably a good troll. And that is today's video. I thank you so much for watching. It was rather long, but this is the first episode to something new, something wonderful. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. I'm going to leave you off with one more bonus fact about this flamboyant businessman. I wish him all the best. I'm going to make an update in a couple years if the situation changes, and this applies to many billionaires that will be featured on this channel. But this is one of those crazy things. People were stunned to hear that he tossed over 130,000 pounds worth of gold coins into the ocean. Why did he do this? Because a Brazilian African religious leader advised he needed to appease a water-bound deity, Yamanja, known as the Queen of the Seas, for his past ungrateful actions revolving around the drilling in the ocean. I'd also like your opinions. How did I do this first episode? If you're hungry for more, the links to all the information featured in this video will be in the description below, alongside some of my personal links. Or should I feature more crazy stories? You let me know. Thanks. See you guys. Make that money.